Brigade presents the Realty Debate, powered by Reliance Home Finance with Manisha Natarajan.
Welcome to the Realty Debate. Our spotlight today is on the big mission of the government, Housing for All. Where is it really going? Now, 2 out of 5 years of the Modi-led NDA government are complete, and we know how quickly time flies. So is the mission of Housing for All on the runway yet or not? Otherwise, how is it going to take off? Remember, this was a mandate that the government floated. It was part of the election mandate, and then it was made official last year. So a year later is the most pertinent question to be asking. Joining us, Hiranandani, CMD Hiranandani Group and President Naredco West. Also with us, Gulam Zia, Executive Director, Advisory, Retail and Hospitality, Knight Frank, India. Sudhir Vora, Principal Architect, Sudhir Vora Consultants and Urban Planner and Urban Law Expert. Dr. M. Ramachandran, former Secretary, Ministry of Urban Development, and his voice would be so important because he's been in the thick of action when this was being drawn out. Sameer Jasuja, Founder and MD of Prop Equity. Gentlemen, I couldn't have asked for a better panel. But before I go on and ask you the questions, let me just actually quickly see what's happened. Let's do a status check, frankly. Mission Housing for All 2022 was launched on 17th June 2015. So we're really a year apart from there, or a year ahead. Mission to build 6 crore homes, 2 crore in urban and 4 crore in rural India, which translates into 85 lakh homes every year. Now the number was so staggering that even we were wondering how could the government even comprehend such a massive policy. If you take urban alone, India needs to build 30 lakh homes in the let's say 15 lakh, 10 to 15 lakh category to meet this mission. Now let's see what's happened July 2016, and we're going to show you data taken from the Housing Ministry website for urban housing because there's still no data on rural on the site. We added the project sanctioned, proposed houses and those built under 4 schemes of the government, and guess what the numbers showed? Total houses completed 1645. We understand that real estate houses don't get constructed in a year. So yes, this were probably houses which were started earlier and have got completed, but still number 1645. Total houses proposed. Now remember, if you got to meet that mission, just on urban housing, you've got to make 30 lakh homes every year. But total houses proposed by the ministry itself are only 7.28 lakhs. So there's a shortfall of 22.7 lakh. I'm not going to go into the details of what schemes these are. There's in situ slum rehabilitation, then there are other affordable housing, private partnership projects. So these are under 4 schemes. Mr. Ramachandran, what's going on? I mean, where are we on this? I mean, you should be focusing on this or must be watching this very closely. Were you surprised when the government came out with such a humongous target?
Yes, the target really appeared to be very huge, but I always give credit to the government for at least starting off with a target because this did not exist before.
But Dr. Ramachandran, why put a target which looks absolutely unachievable? I mean, look at our track record. What gave them that comfort or any confidence that this could be completed or be met?
We can have an ambitious target, we can have a very modest target. But looking at the requirement, if the target is kept in terms of what is the requirement and 2022, I'm sure you will take note of the fact that in the initial phase, it was launched in June last year, we are talking about 1 year later. So initial phase, it takes some time for the states also to gear up as to where they want these houses built and what is the project which they are preparing and sending to the central ministry. So it's a question of approval, and in terms of approval, it has reached a figure of close to 10 lakhs if my figures are correct. So that is the approval provided so far. Now approval, construction, this process goes on, and ideally it would start picking up after 1 or 2 or 3 years or so, and then it will suddenly reach a peak in the 4th, 5th, 6th year when there are sufficient sanctions, funds released and states are in a position to execute this. I'm sure you will also note the difference here in the sense that these are essentially government sector construction. I don't know where the private sector is chipping in. I don't have much of a figures on that. If they're also coming in, nothing like it, then probably it'll move faster. So it's the same existing machinery of government which has to undertake this task. It was being done in other forms earlier, but if we compare the figures of present with the other forms earlier, for the rural Indira Awas or for the urban under the JNNURM, what happened under BSUP, I do expect I think the analysis would be correct.
So let me ask you a very simple question. Do you see with the change of government acceleration at least in this whole mission of creating affordable housing? Do you feel that we are on the runway?
I would
at
think
least
so. I would
you would
think
say so.
so. I
Okay,
would
that's,
think so.
Okay, that's a very, very positive statement coming there. Sudhir, what do you feel?
I think there's a movement towards affordable housing. I think I agree with Dr. Ramachandran to a large extent that these things don't happen overnight. It's not as visible as what you do in a road program or something like that, where I think this government has shown very quick results. I mean, anybody who looks at the way the highways and all have been built now would be really impressed by the speed of construction. In terms of rural in terms of housing, both urban and rural, there is a movement. It's only a year old. It will take a little more time for the lands to be consolidated and various things happening. But I think I agree that once it starts happening, it will accelerate. And
Okay,
it's not a gloomy picture, but it's there, it's happening, but it's probably not.
It's not
openly
disappointing.
visible.
Nobody is dejected here. Everyone's saying, okay, the government's intentions are good, and you do see some movement and action. Niranjan, Hiranandani, come in here. I mean, of course, this is a very, very different segment of housing that we're talking about. It affects your city the maximum. I mean, in situ slum rehabilitation has been such a large challenge for that city. And if you were to evaluate what's happened in the last 2 years of the new government in your state, what would you say?
I would say exactly the same thing, that the intention is fantastic. It is absolutely on the ball. Mr. Devendra Fadnavis has repeated it, has made ease of doing business, moved towards it, declared the intention. Our state housing policy has started making the necessary moves and noises about it, but implementation is still not started. So I think we have to see that off the ground very quickly. One of the big things where the decisions of the government, both at the central and state for Mumbai, has seen a paradigm change is the fact that 2,500 acres of salt pan lands are now going to be used for affordable housing and economically weaker section housing. I think this is a big move.
Okay, Ghulam. So 3 thumbs up saying that, okay, intent is there and you are seeing some amount of action. These things, I mean, in a democracy do take time to aggregate something like land, to get states on board. Everything will take its time. Now, we are talking just about the EWS LIG segment. We're not talking about the segment that developers are calling affordable, which is, 25 to 35, 40 lakhs. There's a huge pent-up demand there, but really for the bottom of the pyramid population of India, which requires that basic dignity, which is a roof over their head. Are you enthused by the mission and the action which has happened so far?
Well, whatever I've heard so far, it's clear that we are talking about a vision. I would not really call it even a strategy or anything. To me, it's a vision that the topmost leader of the country has put for the country. But then when the vision has to change into mission and to action and to strategy and plan of action, well, there is not much seen yet. When I hear you talking, you gave certain number and the first panelist spoke about 10 lakh approvals, etc. It shows that there is a clear lack of communication. If there is something already happening, then we as stakeholders also need to know, because whatever said and done, even if it's a small role that the real estate sector, existing real estate sector of India will play in it, but they will nonetheless be an important stakeholder in the whole thing. So I agree that the government machinery will be doing a huge chunk, but first of all, whether the government machinery has done this kind of a job earlier is itself a big question. Today when we talk about the road sector, mind you, the road work is going on for so long. It's for the first time somebody has put up a vision in front of us that everybody must have a house on top of his or her head. Now, how long will it take? So it's got to have some kind of an action plan coming in front of every citizen of the country. So it's not enough only to say that I have a certain 10 lakh approval given, but then once again, if you talk about the vision and the target that we have set for ourselves, what are we doing to achieve, or what are we going to reach, how are we going to reach that distance, something that is very important for all of us to know. And to me, that communication is not forthrightly coming.
Okay. the four schemes that I see, and I'm just going to look at some of the data. The mission provides, and Dr. Ramachandran, I'm going to come back to you. You said the mission provides central assistance to urban local bodies and agencies for states through four mediums: the in situ rehabilitation of slum dwellers through private participation, credit-linked subsidy, affordable housing in partnership, again I'm assuming it's with private parties, and subsidiary for beneficiary-led individual housing construction enhancement. Now, some states have already been ahead in the game, like Gujarat and Maharashtra at some level, and there are some states like Haryana and etc. who don't even have a plan or just anything at all in terms of, they've not come out with any policy at all for affordable housing. Weigh in all of this for us and tell us that really you said the government has been doing it, but either center or state, and this is state actually, center there's only one policy, but are they capable of creating such a housing stock? And don't you think that private participation should have been far more closer? Like Ghulam has just pointed out that we're not hearing enough. I mean, our builders, developers being called who've got experience in doing all of this, that come talk to us on the table and tell us how do we make this possible?
I do not see much scope for private participation as far as this segment is concerned.
Really? So you're saying that all of this has to be done by the government?
What is proposed is for the lowest segment, for which I think they have to be dependent on government sources of funding. If there is a private participation coming in as far as building is concerned, that is going to add to the cost. Now, as far as communication is concerned, I think there is communication with respect to whoever is concerned. Now, any website if you take up, and any particular state, you refer to some states which are forward in this, there are 11 states which have got approval so far. So there are certain number of other states who have not been able to get the process moving and get the approvals. So ultimately it's a question of where the action should be. Once a scheme is formulated, it is known to the states, and how do the states take it forward. And again we must consider, even if you take the example of highways, it is in certain segments. Here it is spread out in 4,000 plus cities and towns of the country. So it's not something which is going to happen in 20 or 30 cities. So you have to get this aggregated, looking for land, looking for the beneficiaries, what is the type of finance which should be made available, which would be the source, the construction agency which would be undertaking this task.
Let me ask Mr. Niranjan Hiranandani. Mr. Hiranandani, would you be interested in building homes under 15 lakh rupees? Would developers be in general?
I would love to do it. The problem is land cost. I have already proposed to the state government, Mr. Devendra Fadnavis, that we would like to do this segment of housing and take up a small portion or a big portion depending on how much he can give us, and make it on a cost-to-cost basis and return it back to government in terms of constructed areas. We'd like to do it on behalf of Naredco. We'd like to do it on behalf of our company. We'd like to participate, but as our Honorable Secretary has mentioned, if the government is doing it itself, it's fine with us, but we can also participate in this segment to the extent that the government desires us to do so, and we'd be very happy to do so.
Okay. Sameer Jasuja, is there any incentive for private sector to get into under 15 lakh homes?
You know, the government really wants the 18,500 developers that we alone are tracking to get proactive in this space, offering them extra FSI, them to be able to use that FSI in doing some private development, maybe in different land parcels and so on and so forth. I think will go a long way in achieving this big dream. I think there are various ways in which the government can incentivize the developer community and mobilize them in able to achieve this above objective in every which way. I would believe that. So, and without their participation, I don't think it's going to be achievable by the government.
Sudhir Vora, look at the central funding. Now it's 1 to 1.5 lakh per unit. Now constructing a house in a metro, even in smaller towns, where are you going to be able to make anything in less than 8 to 10 lakhs? So the subsidies that we're talking about, the funds that we're talking about, all of these, there seem to be that there are many gaps which need to be filled up, isn't it?
No, I don't think you should look at it only as one particular segment of 8 to 10 lakhs. There have been schemes and done by government in some parts of northern India where they've got one-room tenements which have cost about 1.5 lakhs, a little more than that. Outside Chandigarh, there are lots of them. They go up ground plus 3 floors. They're very comfortable. They're fine.
Okay.
You need to, it's not one size fits all. You have Rajkot, I think, which has traditionally been doing this for a longer time than probably other towns of Gujarat. It's a predominantly industrial town, where I remember about 8-10 years ago, you could get a small dwelling unit, Pakka house, for about 2.5 lakhs. So it's like starting from a bicycle to a motorcycle to a small car to a big car. You know, you really have to look at it from the bottom of the pyramid. And there have been good examples. May not be that they are well known because they don't come into the limelight. I don't think the private sector still looks at development of urban housing as a profit motive only. I don't blame them for that. But there are some skills in the private sector which government could maybe leverage, which is to build very quickly and mass housing. But there have been some success stories. I've just named 2 towns. One of them is not really an industrial town. One is outside Chandigarh and all. So it will start from the bottom of the pyramid, and I think that will snowball upwards.
Okay, Ghulam, you believe that would, I mean, we also within the private sector have some examples. There is a Poddar, then there are some companies, private companies in Ahmedabad. It's a city. It's not, you don't even have to go to Rajkot, who are being able to give houses in 10 lakh rupees. But that's a very, very tiny part of the universe, isn't it? I mean, so they're almost like you can count them on your fingertips or less than one hand fingertips.
Yeah, you're right. There are, of course, examples even I can cite. There is a group called Pandhe, which has actually constructed houses in Sholapur for as much as about ₹1 lakh. And these are kind of tenements that we were hearing about, that a small one room dwelling, etc. So cost is not that much of an issue. I'm not really focusing on cost. My concern is a plan of action for the entire sector. Like, even if I have to phase it out, that I will do so much for urban, say to begin with, urban will be taking some time to organize the infrastructure, logistics and land cost, etc. And later on we'll focus on this, but at least to begin with, even on rural, if we have to take up this big case of thousands or lakhs of those houses to be put up in rural housing, even there I'm saying my concern is we have resources, even if it is private, if we can get them into to contribute, like as Niranjan ji was talking about, if we have to all put all hands on the deck and say, hey, all of us are here to construct, to support this vision of the Prime Minister, let's all get together and do it. So here it is not about if private can come, they can participate. Private must be a part of this whole initiative.
Dr. Ramachandran, come in on that. I mean, really, I feel that there is a huge logic and argument to that you have to bring on board every resource that you have. The government alone may not be able to meet that mission or that task, and look at the quality of construction that you get. I mean, there are unoccupied houses in the affordable segment because no one wants to go them. The math has been wrong. The quality is not worth it. So how do we get the private sector and the public sector for once have a PPP model work in housing in India?
Before that, I just wanted to comment on this point about incentivizing. This is a national task, providing housing for people who do not have a dwelling. So if it has to be incentivized, I think I would like to say, rather than incentivize, the different sections of society should come and participate in that process, including the developers. One should not really be looking for incentives. If the local body has identified the land, it's a question of taking the construction forward, working in tandem with the proposed beneficiaries. So it's a national challenge, it's a national task. The second point I want to mention is, no one says the private sector need not be involved, but if in the government scheme of things, a house is being built for 1 or 1.5 lakh, it may have its own limitations. Will the private sector also come in and do it at the same cost without asking for any overheads on that? That is the question, and I think that type of an action has to happen in this huge task. Only then it's going to happen. Those who are building huge houses, and if I may say so, those who are making good money out of that, they should voluntarily go. I think one meeting with the Chief Minister should be sufficient. In these cities, we are prepared to work with you to build this many houses. Just show us the land, the rest we will take care, and make an arrangement for channelizing the funds which would become available.
Well, we've had Mr. Hiranandani saying that he's already approached the Chief Minister and said that they're ready to work, and you're saying that's exactly what's needed. We can only hope, gentlemen, that the public and the private partnership here really works. The state governments realize they need the private developers say it's a national task. In fact, I think everyone should get together and do it simply because you could have that big real economic booster which comes from just construction activity. Imagine if so many houses started getting built, the boost you would get to GDP. Thank you so much, Niranjan Hiranandani. Pleasure to have you with us. Gulam Zia, thank you so much. Sudhir Vora, Dr. Ramachandran and Sameer Jasuja. Well, there are larger states, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh and Haryana, which haven't even started off when it comes to affordable housing. But then there are also states which have been very progressive and are going great guns with it, and they just need to keep up with the momentum. We are keeping our fingers crossed. We'll come back with a report card. Affordable housing, basic need, everyone must have a roof over their head. Thank you so much for joining me. Goodbye.